Hey Ornament Girls, this is Stacy Ann, and today I'm going to be making a snow globe ornament which features Horizon of Hope fabric by Longaberger in the center. The snow globe pattern is our quilted ornament pattern, which lets you feature a picture, a logo, or basically anything that you want to showcase in the center of your ornament. Just a quick note before we start, Ornament Girl patterns are copyrighted. It's illegal to teach them or sell them. If you do want to share this, please feel free to share the link to this free video. Also, we do offer complete ornament kits. Our kits contain pre-cut fabrics and all the materials that you will need to make our ornaments. Okay, so let's talk about what you'll need to make this specific ornament. First, you need your fabrics. You'll need 2 pieces of whatever you want your centerpiece fabric to be. I've got 2 squares here that are about 3.5 inches square. You don't have to be exact with that, but somewhere between 2 to 3.5 inches or so is ideal. And then you'll need some slightly smaller fabric cuts for the layers that radiate out from the center. These are all 2 by 3 inch rectangles, and I'm only gonna do 2 layers. So for each layer, you'll need 16 pieces. So I've got 16 2 by 3 inch rectangles of the darker pink, and then I've got another 16 2 by 3 inch rectangles of the lighter pink. And then last but not least, you'll need 1 longer strip of fabric in one of your colors. This is about 2.5 inches wide by about 10.5 inches long. Other supplies that you'll need are a couple of 100 straight pins. I'm probably gonna use about 175 for this ornament, and a 3-inch foam ball. My ball has been divided into 8 equal segments. We do have pre-lined foam balls on the Ornament Girls shop, but you can also easily divide this yourself and draw your own lines. We've got a short video that'll show you exactly how to do that, and it only takes a couple minutes. And then you'll need whatever you want to embellish with. I'm gonna use some pink trim on mine. This is gonna wrap around the outside of the ornament, and it's about 10.5 inches or so long. I'm also gonna add a little pink ribbon charm. So I've got my charm and a couple of jump rings. I've got a pink pearl tipped pin. This is for my hanger. And then I've got some ribbon. So I've got 2 24-inch pieces. I'm gonna make 2 bows out of these longer pieces. And then I've got a shorter piece here, which is about 10 inches or so long, and this is going to be for my hanger. Okay, so tools. I do have a couple of pairs of jewelry pliers. This isn't necessary for the fabric part of the ornament, but it is going to help me make my dangling pink ribbon charm. I'm also going to use a flexible tape measure and scissors. So I think that's everything. Let's go ahead and start. So we're going to start with one of those squares of feature fabric. And we need to find the point that you want to be the very center of the first side of your ornament. So with this fabric, it's pretty easy because we have a pretty cut and dry center right there in the middle of that little diamond shape that's created with the print on the fabric. But if your fabric is different, find where you want the center point to be, the very center focal point. And so for me, I know I want it to be right in the middle between the bows going both horizontally and vertically. So I'm just going to kind of let my eye go right into the center and stick my pin right through the middle there. And on this Hope fabric, it's kind of right there at the top of the letter O. Looking at it straight on, it looks like I need to come a little bit to the left. That looks pretty straight. And I'm gonna put this right into the middle of one side of my foam ball. Now the center is where one of the pole markings are. The pole markings, there's 2 of them. There's one on either half of your ball, and the whole thing is divided by an equator going around the center. So you can kind of think of it like a little earth. And then you've got those 8 lines going all the way around, radiating out from the 2 poles. I'm just gonna pick one of those 2 poles. On the Ornament Girl soft foam balls, it's one of those poles is the Ornament Girl logo. So I'm just gonna stick my pin right into the middle, right into one of those poles. Okay, so we've got that. And we're gonna flatten this down over the ball and pin it. But before we do so, we wanna make sure that the top and bottom of our image is lining up with one of the lines below on the foam. And again, with this one, it's pretty easy because we've got these bows that are really square to the center feature, which of course is the word hope. So I'm just gonna look at my top bow here and align it with one of the lines right on the foam. Just kind of shift it side to side until you have it where you want it. And then I'm going to smooth this down and pin it kind of close to the outer edge of the fabric square. And I'll do the same thing at the bottom now, looking at that bottom bow and aligning it with the same line on the foam. So I have that. And now I'll do the same thing with the 2 sides, the left and right sides. And these are already lining up pretty good since I aligned the top and bottom already. So we're gonna let the corners hang free for a second, and we'll go ahead and get the fabric that we want to use on the first layer of the ornament. For me, it's gonna be this lighter pink color. I'm gonna hold this lengthwise with the pattern side facing away from me, and then fold over the top edge just a small amount. So it's about 3/8 of an inch or so, but you don't have to be exact about that. And then we're gonna find the center of this lengthwise by folding it in half the other direction, giving it a little pinch where the fold is, and then unfolding. And right where that crease is marks the center. And I'm gonna pin right there at that center crease and just a hair below the top folded edge. Now this prep that we just did is how we're gonna prep the rest of the 2x3 inch rectangles for the rest of the ornament. Now from here, you're going to want to decide how far out you want your layers to begin. In my case, I've got this really nice ribbon frame that I'm going to use as my starting point for all the pieces in this first layer. So that makes it really easy. If you've got a different fabric though, just decide how far out from the center you want all your pieces to sit. And then you'll want all 8 pieces of this layer to all come out from that same distance from the center. I'm going to use this little bow tie. That's going to be my starting point for my first layer. And just for reference, if you don't have a bow tie to aim off of, I'm measuring from that center pin that I've left in the middle of my fabric square, and I'm sitting about 7/8 of an inch with my pin from that center pin. So all of my pieces are going to be sitting about 7/8 of an inch from the center. If you've got a larger middle image, you might come out just a little bit further. If your image is a lot smaller, you might go in a little bit, but keep it consistent. Whatever measurement you use here on the first piece, you're going to want to use that same measurement for all 8 pieces of this first layer. So we're going to pin this right there at that spot, pressing it flat down, and then we're going to create a triangle out of this. So take the left side, everything to the left of that pin, and fold it straight down like that. We've got half of a triangle, and then we'll take the right side and do the exact same thing, bringing it down to form the rest of the triangle. Now you'll notice that we just created a line running right down the middle of this triangle. We want to actually do a slight overlap of this right side over the left side so that we just have one single line running down the middle. And then we also want that line that we've created to align with that line on the foam below. If we follow these lines throughout the whole ornament, it will help us keep everything really nice and straight. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this at the bottom now. One pin should hold down both sides together, and we've got our triangle pinned in place. For now, I'm going to leave the ends of these free. We're going to put 4 pieces on, and then we're going to kind of try to tidy up these corners a little bit. So let's grab a second rectangle of the same fabric, and we're going to prep it the same way, holding it with the pattern side facing down, folding over the top edge just a little bit, about 3/8 of an inch or so, and then folding it in half the other direction and giving it a little crease. Now unfold that, and we're just going to pin right through the middle, right on that crease, and just a hair below the top folded edge, just like we did before. I'm going to flip this over and do the exact same thing directly opposite my first triangle. I'm going to pin right there at the bow, which is 7/8 of an inch away from my center pin, if you need the measurement, if you don't have a bow. And then I'm going to create my triangle just like before. Left side straight down, forming half of a triangle, and then right side straight down, forming the other half of the triangle, just barely overlapping that left side just a touch, just enough so that we can use one pin only to hold down both halves. And now I'm aligning that line on the triangle with the line on the foam below. And then once you've got it where you want it, go ahead and stick a pin at the bottom to hold both halves in place. Now we'll do the same thing at the left and the right. I'm pinning right there on that left bow, making sure that that line that I created is aligning with the line on the foam, and then pinning at the bottom to hold it in place. Let's do that one more time over here. Okay, so our first 4 pieces of this layer are complete. We're still going to add another 4 between these first 4, but before we do that, we want to tidy this up by flattening out this fabric as much as possible and getting the corners of our first 4 triangles pinned down on top. So this is the part where we have to do a little finagling to smooth this out. We are trying to push flat fabric down onto a round surface, so we do have to kind of mess with it a little bit, but it's not too bad. I'm going to start by just taking a corner and just pulling it down, giving it a little bit of a tug. I don't want to pull it so tight that I yank my fabric all out of proportion here, but I'm just gonna pull it down and give it a little pull to smooth it out as much as possible. And I'm gonna pin down here at the bottom to hold it in place. And then on these two neighboring triangles that are right over that spot, I'm just gonna push the fabric, any excess fabric that's bubbling up from the bottom piece, up underneath those flaps, and then smooth down the corner of the triangle over top of it, and then pin those corners down to hold them in place and to also help hold the fabric from below in place. I'll do the same thing down here with this one. And you'll find that some of these corners will come together really easily, and some of them are gonna take a little extra messing with, but it's not impossible. And also anything that you still have, like any little bubbles that you still have, we'll still be able to get worked out, especially when we're putting our last 4 triangles on. So we'll just keep going around and doing the same thing with all the corners. And sometimes you don't even need to pin down the corner. Like on that first piece, I pinned down here in the bottom center. You don't necessarily need to do that. You can hold it down and then just sort of mess with the sides, smooth down those neighboring triangles and pin them. And that is sometimes enough to help hold that down. It just depends on how difficult that corner is being. And then one more thing I want to point out, you can see I still have a bubble like kind of in the middle right here. That's actually fine because we're going to be putting a triangle right here in this spot, which is going to hide that. So if you have a bubble that you're really struggling with to get rid of, try to make it so that it sits right in the middle between the two neighboring triangles. That way you'll be able to hide it. There we go. That is not too bad. Now let's finish this layer by putting 4 more triangles right in between of those first 4. We're gonna prep the fabric the same way as always. I'm still gonna use my ribbon border as my starting point for each of these pieces, but if you don't have that, you can use the same measurement that you already used for those first 4 pieces. And for me, that was about 7/8 of an inch. For you, it'll be whatever you used for these 4 pieces. And you're just gonna eyeball the center between the points of the 2 neighboring triangles. You can start on any one of these sections, by the way. You're just gonna eyeball the center between those 2 neighboring points at the same distance from your center pin as the other points, and press it in just like always, and we'll create the triangle. Almost just like always, except for this time, we can not only pin down the center, but also the corners. Now you still have all these other lines here, so we're actually gonna center this triangle, the line down the center, with the line that's directly below. Make sure that line is nice and straight. And yeah, you're gonna be pinning over top of other fabric triangle corners, and it looks a little messy under there, but that's okay. Just pin right down on top of them. And I'm gonna go ahead and pin my corners down as well. Okay, so there's the first one of this section of pieces. I'm just gonna work my way around doing the exact same thing. As you're adding these, just double check that that flat fabric below is laying nice and smooth. If it's not, you can always push it down in there and then put a pin down there where you know that this new triangle is gonna hide it. So if I had a bubble right here, for example, I could kind of push it down and I could stick a pin right down here, because I know that now when I flip this corner back over, it's going to be hidden. Okay, one more to go. All right, that's it for layer 1. And at this point, you can remove that pin that's in the very center. If you've got a little hole in your fabric, you can just kind of nudge it out with your fingernail, and that usually does the trick. We're gonna do one more layer of triangles surrounding this, and I'm gonna go to my darker pink for this one. Same prep as always. And starting over one of the first 4 pieces of the previous layer, so it'll be one of those triangles that's partially covered up by the neighboring ones. I'm just gonna come down from the tip of that triangle, right down its center line by like maybe 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch or so. The distance that you choose to come down from that point is not really that important. What's important is that whatever distance you choose, that you do the same for all of them. And the further down you come, the more of this first layer is going to show. If you go closer to the tip, then you'll have a thinner line showing, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'm just coming down, I think I've probably come down about 3/8 of an inch or so from the tip of that triangle below. I'm pressing this right down on top of it, right along that center line from that triangle. And I'm going to create my triangle the same way, folding down the left and the right sides. And then you can see that I've got a little border of the light pink showing from below. So the further you come down from the tip, the more of that light pink border, or whatever color you're using, is going to show. Just like always, I just want to make sure that this line that I created aligns with the line on the foam below. Doing that not only keeps all your triangles looking really, really straight when you're looking at the ornament from the front, but also both your halves will align along those same lines, which means they'll match up really nicely when we're done. Now for this layer, for all 8 of these triangles, we can go ahead and pin down those outer corners. We don't have any loose fabric flapping around from below that we have to worry about. So I'm just going to go around. I'm going to start over the first 4, just like I did on the first layer. I'm going to go bottom, top, left, and right, and then I will complete the 4 going between those. Just for reference, I'm pinning about 3/8 of an inch from the tip of that triangle below. Now the bottom pins on the bottom of these triangles should be sitting right about where that equator line is on your foam. Remember that line that's running around the whole ball and it's dividing the 2 halves in half? Your pins are going to sit pretty much in line with that line. Even if you can't see the line, that's about where our pins are sitting. Now, if you started with a really small picture in the middle, or maybe you started your first layer closer in from the center, you can play with the distance here that you bring out this second layer. You may maybe even want to add 3 layers if you want to. You want your last layer's bottom pins to kind of come out where that equator is, and you can absolutely play with these measurements and your number of layers in order to achieve that. All right, there's the first 4 triangles of this layer. I'm going to go ahead and add 4 more in between. And just like that, that layer is done, and also side 1 is done. And guys, the good news is side 2 is done exactly the same way. We do want to make sure though that the same direction that our picture on side 1 is facing, we want like up and down wise, we want to make sure it's the same on side 2. And it's amazing how easy it is to accidentally turn your square just a little bit, and then when you go to put your bow and hanger on the top, one side is not hanging straight. So to make this really, really simple, I'm just going to take a pin and pin right at the top of my ornament. So right there at about the equator line, I've got a pin just sticking out. I'm gonna let that kind of be my marker pin to let me know when I flip this over that that is my top. That way, if this thing moves around on my table while I'm getting my center square ready for the second side, I know exactly where to aim this thing when I go to put it on. So we'll do the same thing to find the center, just like we did on side 1. I'm just gonna look at this and just kind of eyeball exactly where I want my center to be. This is going to be the point that gets pinned right there at the pole marking, and that looks pretty straight to me. And so I'm going to go ahead and pin this right there into the center again, just like we did on side 1, but then making sure that the top of my image is pointing straight up at that marker pin. And of course it's right at a line because everything was in line with lines. So that's sitting right there in line with that line on my foam. I'm going to make sure my little bow tie is also in line. And then once I've got it where I want it, I'll go ahead and stick a pin up there to hold this in place. And we'll do the same thing at the bottom. You can always unpin and adjust if things don't look right to you as you go to pin this down. Okay, so now that we've got that in place, we can go ahead and remove that marker pin. We do not need that anymore. And we'll go ahead and grab the fabric for layer 1. I'm going back to my lighter pink. I'm going to do my side 2 exactly like I did side 1. And if your fabric image is the same, you'll probably want to do the same thing. And you can use whatever same measurement that you use from your center pin if you don't have this exact fabric. Now, if you can't see the lines on your foam anymore when you go to pin down your triangle, you can just look at the lines that are directly opposite. Mine's a little off actually. Straighten that out just a touch, but you can align the center line of these new triangles right there with the center line of the triangles that are directly opposite. And I'm going to go ahead and finish my first 4 triangles at the top, bottom, and the left and right, leaving all of the corners free. So again, at this point, we can go ahead and tighten things up under here as we go around and pin down the corners of each of these first 4 triangles. All right, and then we'll add 4 more triangles in between of those first 4. Now guys, if you start to have some fabric overlapping into side 1, that's okay, and it's likely that it's going to happen, but you do want to keep your pins from going too far into side 1. Anything that's excess we can trim off unless you've pinned it down. So like in this case here, I wouldn't have wanted to have my pin like, you know, way down here in the corner because it's so far into side 1 that I wouldn't be able to trim it off. So keep your pins pretty much from going over where that equator line is. And even though we can't see it anymore, we do have a general idea of where it is. It's pretty much right where the bottom pins from side 1 are sitting. So keep your pins from going past that. We don't want that to happen. But any fabric overlap is totally fine, and we'll take care of that in just a couple minutes. Okay, so we can take out the center pin now. And then also this is the time to go ahead and trim any excess. And if you don't have any excess, that's okay too. We're still doing another layer, but if you've got some little extra bits sticking out like I do here, you can go ahead and just carefully trim those away. Just be careful you don't trim too much, or you don't accidentally trim parts of your side 1 triangles, which can happen if you're not careful. Just take it nice and slow. Okay, so you'll have something kind of like this, and we're going to go ahead and add our last layer. This is going to be done exactly the same as it was on side 1. But it's likely you'll have some overlap again, maybe even more so this time. So just keep in mind that pin line, and it's going to be right around the center, kind of at the bottom of your side 1 triangles. That's pretty much where that pin line needs to stay. And we do want, since this is our final layer, if it's your final layer for your ornament, you want that final layer's bottom pins to make one nice neat line running around the outside of the ball. So just keep that in mind as you go. On this final layer, I sometimes find it helpful to trim after the first 4 pieces just because it starts to get a little bit more bulky. If you need to trim, you can do the same. Okay, we're ready for one final trim. So we have one nice even pin line running right around the center here, and we're gonna use that one longer strip of fabric to cover all that up. So you're gonna hold this with the pattern side facing away and just start at one end, and we're gonna fold this into thirds. So I'm gonna fold in one side about a third of the way or so, and then we're gonna fold in the other side to meet it. So what we've got is a band which has a raw edge running down one side, but when you flip it over, we have no raw edges. And we're just gonna put this at the top, wherever the top of your ornament is. And by the way, if you need to make your band thicker, just fold it in a little bit less. If you need to make it thinner, fold it in a little bit more. I am gonna make mine just a touch thinner. So I'm gonna fold in the sides just a little bit more. Go back up here to the top. And I'm just going to use a couple of pins up here to hold this in place. And then we're just going to continue that fold as we wrap it around the ball and cover all of those raw edges and pins as we go. And I like to pull this pretty snug, but not way too tight to where it distorts the fabric. If you've got any little pin heads trying to poke through, you can just push them down with your finger as you go. And then when you get to your starting point, go ahead and give it another couple of pins to hold it. If you have any excess, you can go ahead and lop it off. And now the only pins and raw edges that we've got is right there at the top, which we're going to cover with a bow in just a couple of minutes. So now it's time to embellish, and I'm going to start by getting my little charm ready. So I'm just going to make myself a little dangle that's going to hang down from beneath my bow with these jump rings and my charm. And to do that, I'm just going to open up my jump ring. Now when you open up a jump ring, you do want to open it like I just did, side to side. You don't want to stick your pliers in there and open it up to widen it out. Otherwise you'll never be able to get it closed all the way. Let me zoom in just a little bit so you can see that better. So now I can go ahead and just attach a jump ring. I'll go ahead and attach 2 of them. I want to see how long this is for me. I think I want to go 1 more loop. So we'll open up 1 more, like that. I'll go ahead and attach the 3 that I already did. So I've got a longer chain now, and I'm going to also attach my charm. I'll close it back up. And now we've got a little dangle we can attach to the ornament. In just a minute, we'll attach this with the bows, but I'll set this aside for a second. Before I can put my bows on, I need to attach my trim. You don't have to add trim to this, but it can be kind of cute. I'm just going to add it right on top of my band. So I'm going to start it at the same starting point as my band, and I'm going to pin it into place. I need a pin with a point though. So I'm pinning that down. If you have a super loose woven trim like I've got, it might take more than 1 pin. But I'm just gonna lightly wrap that around and come back to my starting point and give it another pin to hold it. Let's give it a couple. The bow is also gonna help to hold that on. And I've got a little excess, so I'll trim that off. Very cute. And now I'm going to go ahead and make my bows. So I've got 2 different ribbons here. I'm going to put the sheer ribbon on the bottom because it's a little bit wider, and I'm going to just make a little bit of a tiered bow. So to make my bow, I'm going to stick a pin through one end of my ribbon, and then I'm just going to loop this. I'm just going to form loops. So I'm going to just curl it around and pin right back through, and I'll measure this for you so you know how big I'm making my loops, but really it's up to you how big you want your loops to be. I'm going to aim to go about 3 inches. So I'm going to loop about 3 inches. I do tend to be an eyeballer. And then just keep going, looping it back around, same amount, and pinning back through again. So there's 2 loops. If you don't like how it ends up when it's done, you can always just take it all off the pin and start over again. I'll show you an alternative way to do a bow here in a second with the other piece of ribbon. So I've got a little excess here. It's not really enough to loop again, so since I'm happy with the bow otherwise, I'll just go ahead and trim that off. And this is going to be my bottom bow on the ornament, but before I pin it down on top, I'm going to put the top ring of my little homemade charm right onto, if I can get a hold of it, right onto this pin underneath the bow. And I want to make sure that my charm is going to hang the right way, which right now it's hanging backwards. So let me just flip this around. And then we will pin this guy right to the top where all those other pins are. And now the charm is held on by the bow. Let's do one more bow. We have a little tool in the OG shop, and we also have a free version that you can print out yourself and stick to some cardboard if you don't want the acrylic version. But this is for those of you guys who maybe have trouble getting really consistent loops just by eyeballing, which by the way, you don't have to get super consistent, perfect loops. You do not need to be a perfectionist, but I know some of you are. So if you want to, you can use this handy little tool that we've got, and you can make loops with different sizes with this. Since I did about 3-inch loops on my bottom bow, I want to tier this and make it a little bit smaller since it's going on top of that one. So I'm going to go for the 2 3/4 inch size loops. I know it's probably hard to read on the video. Here, let me do that. You can see that on all the sides, we've got different size loops available here on this little tool. I'm gonna go with the 2 3/4, and you'll see that on each of these sides, there's a little arrow right in front of the groove. I'm just gonna go ahead and lay this right at that line. There's a line right there above that arrow. I'm gonna lay this right there at that line, and then I'm just gonna wrap this ribbon right around the bow maker. It's a very slippery ribbon. Just keep wrapping it until you get to the end. And when you get to the end, hold it in place and then stick a pin right down in the middle so that it goes right through the ribbon and right through that little groove and through the opposite side. So now it's holding it all together, and we can slide it right off of the bow maker. And then all you have to do is just fluff it out. For me, the fluffing it out is like the hardest part of using the bow maker, getting them to separate. But when you do, you'll see that you have really consistent loops. And like I said, we actually have a free printable that you can download and cut out and stick to like maybe a piece of cardboard or cardstock or something, and you can make your own bow tie template just like this. Or we have these plastic ones available in the shop. And then we'll just pop this guy right down on top of the first bow. Floof it out a little more. I feel like these two little loops need to get flip-flopped. There we go. Okay guys, we are almost done. All we need to do now is put the hanger on, and this is very easy with that shorter piece of ribbon. Just go ahead and put the ends together. And my ribbon is a little too long. Let me snip off a little bit. I snip off about 1 inch or so. Put the ends together and then take that pearl tipped pin, or you could use a beaded pin, and we'll just put that right through the ends to hold that loop in place, and then pin this directly down on top of the center of that top bow. So now we have no more pins showing at all other than the pretty pearl tipped pin. I feel like I should have used that last jump ring and made that just a touch longer, but otherwise adorable, right guys? So I hope you enjoyed seeing how to make this. If you've got any questions, please, as always, leave them in the comments below and I will help you out the best that I can. Thanks so much for watching, and happy ornamenting.